Okay, picture this. The Gettysburg Address, the Declaration of Independence, two absolute cornerstones of American history.
Yeah, iconic.
Right. Now, imagine they turn up somewhere unexpected, like Latin America, and people are suspicious.
That definitely sounds like a story brewing.
Exactly. That's where we're diving in today. We heard from you listeners, asking about how we really know if historical stuff is legit, and, well, this case popped up.
It's a perfect example. We're looking at a report, a scientific paper, actually, from the Orta Polio Lab in Venezuela. They worked with the Ladera Lab over in Spain.
A collaboration.
Nice. And their whole job was figuring out, are these things real? It really shows you what forensic science can do when, history gets a bit murky.
Okay, so iconic documents, weird location, instant suspicion. What did they actually look like? What were those first sort of alarm bells?
All right, let's take the declaration first. A collector actually brought it in, wanted an authenticity certificate. And right away, its condition was, well, concerning. It was torn up, looked like it had been burned maybe. Really dark brown in the middle, kind of yellowish around the edges.
Brittle.
Very brittle, yeah. Lots of cracks. Hard to read in spots. But the weirdest thing, maybe, under direct light, the ink looked kind of shiny.
Shiny ink on the Declaration. That sounds wrong.
Exactly. Doesn't fit the period at all.
Okay, what about the Gettysburg Address? Same kind of deal.
Similar vibe. It definitely looked old, too. Different shades of brown, yellow. Under the microscope, they saw these tiny dark spots, but also clear spots.
Interesting.
And importantly, it had what looked like Lincoln's signature. And the date, November 19th, 1863. So, superficially, they looked the part.
Right, they had that aged look. But, we know people have been faking historical documents forever, right? Especially Lincoln stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Lincoln forgeries are practically a whole field of study. You had guys like Joseph Cozy, who were notorious. Even stories about family members involved in fakes.
Like the Lincoln Rutledge letters.
That's a classic example, yeah. Really elaborate stuff. But what's interesting here, the report points out that actual forgeries of the original Declaration of Independence, well, they weren't really aware of any major ones.
Huh.
There was a separate thing with the Mecklenburg Declaration, but not the big one. So finding this document down in Venezuela was pretty unusual, really raised the stakes.
That is a key difference. So, okay, the labs get these suspicious items. What tools are in their toolkit? How do they start breaking this down?
They basically threw the forensic book at them. Lots of visual examination, obviously, using different kinds of light, full spectrum, UV, infrared, to see things the naked eye misses.
Standard procedure.
Right. High-res digital scans, powerful microscopes zooming in up to like 300 times, and then, crucially, analyzing the actual paper fibers, chemical tests.
Okay, let's talk paper, because that seems fundamental. What did they find there?
Yeah, this was probably the first massive giveaway, the real declaration. It's on parchment.
Animal skin, right.
Processed animal skin, exactly. This document they were looking at, microscopic analysis found coniferous wood fibers.
Wood fiber, so paper. Modern paper.
Bingo. Not parchment. Immediately, it's not the original. And the Gettysburg Address, same story. Coniferous wood fibers again. Not the kind of paper you'd expect from 1863.
Wow. So the actual material was wrong from the get-go.
Fundamentally wrong. The foundation was just incorrect for both.
Okay. But they still looked old. You said charred, yellowed. How did the forgers pull that off? How did they age the modern paper?
Well, the microscope helped there too. They looked closely at the fibers. On both documents, the fibers right on the surface were darker, more discolored than the fibers deeper inside the paper.
Oh, interesting. Like a suntan.
Sort of, yeah. The labs figured it's probably some kind of external heat source, maybe radiation applied just to the surface, an artificial aging process.
Just cook the outside.
Basically. And chemical tests using something called Hertzberg stain. That confirmed the wood fibers, yeah, but also showed it was chemically processed paper, not handmade like older paper might be, and no watermarks either.
Which you might expect sometimes in older paper.
Exactly. So multiple chemical clues pointing away from genuine historical paper.
Okay, so they faked the aging on modern paper. That's pretty sneaky. What about the writing itself? They looked handwritten, right? Lincoln's signature, the Declaration script.
Yeah, this is where it gets really clever, actually.
Okay.
At first glance, it did look like handwriting. The strokes seemed to vary in thickness, like you'd get with a quill or an old dip pen applying different pressure.
Right, the natural variation.
But under magnification, up to 30x. That shiny ink we mentioned earlier, well, it looks glossy, not like typical period ink.
Yeah.
And crucially, there was no stroke shading.
Stroke shading? What's that?
It means the ink color was totally uniform. Same density on the upstrokes and the downstrokes of the letters.
Mm.
Real handwriting with liquid ink. The ink flows differently, pools slightly, changes density depending on pressure and direction.
Ah, I see. So uniform color means not handwritten.
It strongly points away from it. And there was more. The edges of the ink lines. Super sharp and clear.
Not fuzzy or bleeding into the paper.
Exactly. Old pens tend to press into the paper fibers a bit, creating slightly rougher, maybe indented edges. These were crisp. Also, no signs of pressure marks from a pen nib. No erasures.
Mm-hmm.
And the ink itself, this uniform black ink, it just looked flat. Even on the rougher paper surface, the ink coverage was perfectly even. No squash effect where ink gets pushed aside, no feathering where it bleeds into the fiber.
So all those little details point to printing.
Precisely.
Mm.
The labs concluded both were high-quality printed documents, specifically using a process called offset lithography.
Offset lithography, how does that work?
It's a common printing method. Basically, the image, the text, is put on a plate, then transferred or offset onto a rubber blanket, and then transferred to the paper. It gives you that sharp, uniform result.
Wow. So these weren't even attempts at handwritten forgery. They were sophisticated print jobs designed to mimic handwriting. That's another level.
It really is. Much harder to detect without the right tools.
Were there any other clues, anything else that screamed fake?
Yeah, the Gettysburg Address had another interesting quirk. The folding.
How it was folded?
Yeah, it was folded into 4 parts, but the creases didn't match up with how you'd fold something to fit into, a typical envelope from that time. The pattern was just off.
Okay, weird folding. So what?
Well, remember the artificial aging. Because the folds were uneven. When they applied the heat or light or whatever, some parts got tanned more than others.
Ah. So the exposed parts got darker after it was folded.
Exactly. You could see a mismatch in the tone along the fold lines.
Yeah.
The bits that were tucked inside were lighter than the bits on the outside. That wouldn't happen if it aged naturally over 150 years before being folded like that.
The aging process itself revealed the artificiality because of the weird folding. That's brilliant.
It's a neat little detail, isn't it? The attempt to deceive kind of backfired.
So, summing it up, the labs were pretty certain.
Oh, completely certain. The conclusion was crystal clear. Both documents were reproductions. Wrong paper, modern paper, treated with chemicals and heat to look old. And printed, not handwritten.
It's kind of wild, the effort involved. Did the report suggest why? I mean, were these made purely to scam people?
Well, the report floated an interesting idea. They noted the quality of the printing and paper was actually pretty good.
Good quality fakes.
In a way, yeah. Good enough that they speculate maybe, just maybe, they were originally made for, academic purposes, educational displays. Something not initially meant to deceive.
Like a museum replica or something.
Possibly. But then, with the internet, online sales, the market for historical documents booming. It's plausible someone got their hands on these high-quality reproductions and thought, hey, maybe I can pass these off as the real deal, especially to collectors who might not have access to forensic labs.
Right. The ease of selling online makes it tempting, I guess.
Definitely could be a factor.
So, thinking about our listeners who are fascinated by historical authenticity, what's the big takeaway here? What does this case really teach us?
I think the biggest thing is just how powerful forensic science is.
Yeah.
It shows you can't always trust your eyes, right? Something can look incredibly old, incredibly genuine.
Feel right, even?
Yeah. But when you drill down, when you analyze the tiny details, the paper fibers, the ink chemistry, the way it's folded, the science can uncover the truth. It cuts through the illusion.
It's that real aha moment, isn't it? Finding out that what looks like unique handwriting is actually a mass-produced print. It makes you realize how important it is to look beyond the surface, to scrutinize the materials, the process.
Absolutely. It's like the object itself tells a story, separate from the words written on it. You just need the tools to listen.
Which leads to a bigger, maybe slightly unsettling thought. If documents as famous as these can be faked so convincingly, well, how many other historical artifacts out there might be hiding secrets?
That's the question, isn't it? It makes you think about our desire to, touch the past, to own a piece of history, and how that desire can make us vulnerable sometimes.
Yeah, it definitely underlines the need for, a bit of healthy skepticism and a real appreciation for the scientific work that helps us sort fact from fiction when we look back at history.
Couldn't agree more. Science is key to understanding the real story.